Welcome to Mid-Century Living, your weekly nostalgia podcast about the best of technology and culture from the mid-20th century.
Welcome to episode 36 of Mid-Century Living, the show where we talk all about the best of the mid-20th century and how to add vintage vibes to your modern life. We're your hosts, Jackie
and Gonzalo. Thank you guys for joining us today. So today we're talking about a really cool type of architecture and design with a very funny name. It's called Googie Architecture. Maybe you haven't heard the name before, but we're sure you've seen this type. But first, Jackie, how was your week?
My week was good. Still full of exciting action-packed activities. Maybe not as food-related as my last weekly catch-up, but I finally finished my bathroom cheap remodel, which is something I've been sort of poking at for the 3 years we've lived in the house. So now it is basically done as I can do within my budget, but we replaced the sink, countertop, and then we got a really fancy litter box cabinet that looks like a piece of mid-century furniture with like orange doors, and it's like on legs, and it's walnut looking to hide the litter box in. And then the orange doors on the litter box cabinet inspired me to get this orange and yellow floral shower curtain, which then inspired me to paint the walls yellow. So now it was, when we first moved in, like a gray white, and the countertops were these hideous granite that they put all over the house, but it's like the Home Depot special bare bones, like worst you can buy, and it's just like so ugly but I replaced it with a not very expensive but white sink and like countertop that is a lot cleaner and less hideous looking, and anyway, so that was like the first thing that happened, is that, and then I've just sort of been expanding into thing, but now it's perfect.
Nice.
Oh, I got rid of the towel rack and replaced it with these like walnut hooks sticking out of the walls instead of the like metal thing. Nothing too extreme, but it has taken a while, and painting a bathroom is no joke. Have you ever done that?
No, it's hard. Yes.
There are so many little things to paint around, and there's part of it that you have to be on your stomach trying to paint around the toilet, and it was just like the worst day of my life.
Yeah, you have to remove the toilet so you can paint behind it.
Yeah, I just didn't. I painted around the toilet.
Yeah. Now, what yellow did you use? Did you use yellow or canary or smoker's teeth?
The color is a bear color called roasted corn.
Okay.
Which is cute. I started with like 8 different yellows and finally settled on one, and most of them were food names, like Bananarama and like, I don't know. They were all very silly names, but I settled on roasted corn. And it is so bright and happy, and it's just like so happy to be in there now. And the lights kind of like radiate this yellow glow out of the bathroom when you like have the lights on and the doors are open, and it's like, it's yellow. But I love it, so I'm happy. And I'm glad that it looks a lot more like me than it did when we moved in, so
good.
I'm much happier.
Good.
So how was your week?
My week, I mean, it's summer vacation, so as a teacher, my week is like, I don't do much. I mean, I do have like summer camp in the morning that I go and do for my athletes, and then I'm back, and that's it. I went running with them, and it was horrible, and it sucked because I'm twice their age, and they can run faster and further. And I thought I'm in pretty good shape, but
that's so brave.
Well, they all year long, I was like, oh, they're like, you should come swimming with us, and I go, no. And like, except for the fact that they pushed me, last day of school, they were like doing backflips off the edge of the pool because why not? It's the last day of school.
Sure.
And I was standing near them, and then I go, it's your turn, and I go, I'm not going in the water. And they go, come on, it's your turn, you got to get in. And I go, I'm not going in the water unless you guys catch me and pull me in. And as soon as I said that, I was like, oh man. And I was at a corner and I couldn't run. So then they got me and they threw me in the water. Fully clothed, mind you.
Ugh. Hopefully your phone wasn't in your pocket or anything. That's my biggest fear.
No, it wasn't. They checked. They're like, do you have your phone on you? And I go, no, it's in my office. And they're like, okay. I should have said yes. But anyway, no, my week's been fine. I'm actually just more than anything excited for my upcoming trip. my second part of the summer, because the first trip I talked about in last episode to the north, but my next trip is kind of out of character for me because it's a Caribbean cruise. And while I do love cruising, I like cruises. Caribbean and hot and beach is not exactly where I like to holiday, but I will be holidaying there. I'm excited.
How many? Where are you? Where are your ports?
So it's a 7-day cruise,
Cool.
which to me is a perfect length.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually even consider longer cruises. But anyway, it's the first protocol is in the Dominican Republic, and then it goes on to the British Virgin Islands, and then it goes on to Puerto Rico, and then it goes on to the private island of the Bahamas,
Fun.
where I will be kayaking, and then it goes back to Florida. So I have to fly to Florida, which I'm not excited
Oh
about.
no! Yeah, that's the
Sorry,
worst.
Floridians, if you're listening.
Yeah, I mean, that's a shame because you can sail from Galveston, but the ports of call aren't. I'm pretty sure Galveston only goes to Nassau and back. I don't know
I
if they
took
go
a
anywhere more.
cruise from Galveston down to the Yucatan a couple of years ago.
Oh.
The thing is that my family, it's a family going on the cruise, and they prefer Norwegian. Whereas if I'm traveling by myself, I prefer Carnival because Carnival does the whole like set dining times.
Mm-hmm.
So I can sit with people that I don't know. Which, as introvert as I am, when I'm traveling, I'm a little extroverted.
As we learned from our train etiquette episode, that you're a talker.
Which I talked to so many people on the train my last trip. Except for on my way back to Chicago to Union Station, I had the whole car to myself for the first leg of the trip.
Oh, that's nice.
Also, I thought there was a lady sitting in the very back row, so thankfully I wasn't like singing out loud or anything. But anyway, that's what my week. My week is preparing for the trip, which is in a few weeks. But getting all my stuff ready. Yeah,
I'm glad you were able to convince your family that a cruise was the answer, because they are really great. They're perfect for large family groups like that because people can split apart during the day guilt-free to like do different activities, and then you always just like come back together for dinner and the show.
Yeah. Although I will say, like, I subscribe to the fancy on trips. Like, if I travel by myself somewhere, I like to have a night where it's like I'm gonna go to a fancy restaurant and like I'll put on like nice clothes. So like in the cruise, except for the first night because you don't change in the first night of a voyage, but I dress up for dinner. And last cruise, my dad kind of did. He just put on like a colored shirt. My sister just wore whatever she was wearing the day. So hopefully this cruise, that was her first cruise. So hopefully this cruise, she'll be a little dressier.
I feel like they usually have a dress code where you're supposed to like wear pants to dinner, but maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, but we were in Alaska, so there weren't very few days of wearing shorts. Anyway, so that's me. Maybe we should just get on with the show, which again, we're talking about Googie Architecture, which, by the way, in my outline, every time I wrote Googie, they're like, did you mean Google? Like, no.
Yeah, I'm sure. Especially since you're typing it in a Google Doc.
I know. But what comes to mind when you think space architecture?
You've included a hint, which is the Jetsons, and now that's all I can think about. But I'm trying to think, what would I genuinely have responded to that question with? And I just keep going back to like the mid-century modern, like the super, super modern ones we talked about.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Jetsons works.
Yeah, well, I mean, things like the Jet. If you've ever seen the Jetsons, which hopefully you guys have, or maybe you've been to Las Vegas and seen that famous sign. Which, by the way, I went to Vegas and we did not find the sign.
It's on the edge of town, and apparently you have to wait in line for like 2 hours in the sun to take a picture in front of it.
Interesting. Well, it's a good thing we didn't see it. My sister really wanted a picture by it.
Yeah, because you would have been stuck on the side of the road for 2 hours if you had found it.
Which would not have flown with me, especially because when we went to Vegas, I was, I think, a sophomore in high school. Which, by the way, don't take your kids who are under 21 to Vegas.
My parents took me to Vegas when I was under 21, and I still had a good time.
I mean, I had a good time too, but like we would walk into a hotel and like my mom and my sisters would be like, let's go to the slot machines and see them. And my dad would be like, I want to go watch the people play cards. And then they left the kid
Oh, yeah.
in the middle, and then security's like, you gotta keep moving, son. I'm like, oh, but my parents, my sisters.
So you had
Maybe
to
I
go
was
like
less than sophomore. I think I don't know how old. I was little. Anyway,
well, luckily my sister and I were both under 21 at the time, so we just did like events that my family aren't big gamblers, but they like shows and museums and stuff, so we just did shows in the wax museum and eating. We ate a lot.
I do like eating. Which, by the way, here is our food talk for the week.
Yeah, gotta have
But
food talk. Anyway.
if you've seen the sign, sorry, we got a little off track. If you've seen the sign or you've watched the Jetsons, then you've seen Googie Architecture, because this is basically a type of futuristic architecture influenced by the car culture, jets, the atomic age, and the space age.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it's very popular following World War II, roughly between the years of 1945 and 1970.
Perfect. That is right in our time period that our show is supposed to be. So thank you for getting us back on track.
Yes. The majority of Googie architecture can be found along roadside attractions. So think like old school motels, coffee houses, gas stations, that kind of stuff. The style became part of the mid-century modern style, which we've talked about in our podcast before. So, for example, buildings like the Aero Saarinen TWA terminal in New York City, that is Googie architecture, as is what came before his style.
Cool.
Yeah, a lot of this also comes from American society's fascination with the space age, this futuristic look of the mid-century. So basic features of a Googie is things like upswept roofs, curves, geometric shapes, bold use of glass and steel, especially neon, as not necessarily like painted, but neon as in like neon signs. Space age symbols, features like boomerangs, diagrammatic atoms, freeform design, that kind of stuff.
Yes, boomerangs. But so, like, why isn't it called space architecture or something like that? How did they get the name?
Yes. Okay. So Googie, which is a very weird name, kind of comes from a weird story. Well, not really weird. Maybe just unexpected. But travel back to 1949. Architect John Lautner designed a coffee shop in Hollywood at 8100 Sunset Boulevard called Googie's. That was the name of the coffee shop.
Oh.
Next door to the famous Schwab's Pharmacy. And the style of architecture took its name from this coffee shop after the editor of the House and Home magazine saw it and asked photographer Julius Schulman to take a photo of this place. And the editor, Douglas Haskell, he wrote an article about it in 1952. And from then on, this style of architecture became known as Googie architecture.
So the entire architectural style was named after this one little diner?
Pretty much. Yeah, that's it. I told you, that's maybe it's not a weird story. It's just like a different story.
Yeah, that's unexpected. You're right. That was a good way to put it. Cool. So, for those wondering what the style of architecture is and where it came from, so once again, we have the growth of the auto industry to thank for another episode topic. So, Alan Hess, in his book Googie Redux, Ultramodern Roadside Architecture, attributes the creation of Googie architecture to the car growth in LA. As towns grew and the car allowed people to live away from downtown, stores began to grow and have several locations, downtown and locations in the suburbs. So this meant that stores needed to develop catchy visual imagery so customers would recognize it from the road. The goal was to be extra AF so potential customers could see the store signage as they're zooming past in cars.
So yeah, and quickly the buildings all essentially became like these giant signs advertising whatever their business was to people driving. It was achieved by using bold style choices, elevated signs on pylons made out of overexpressed geometric shapes with colorful, bold neon letters. So to mind comes signs for bowling alleys for some sort. That's what I picture in my head. But buildings and signs created these high energy silhouettes also when the sun went down. In the 1950s, as post-World War II America started to basically celebrate being able to use materials again, because remember, during the war, a lot of things were rationed because of the war effort. So architecture changed from utilitarian to like over the top, which is what we mean by extra AF.
Yeah, I'm picturing like bowling alley signs and like Sonic drive-ins.
Well, that's basically it. Characteristics of Googie architecture, remember, like it's meant to be over the top. So cantilever structures, bold angles, illuminated plastic paneling, roofs sloped upward. So imagine a roof, it's the opposite, right? It's down at the center of the house and then goes up towards the edges. So it's very unique to Googie and kind of translated then on into mid-century modern. So many Googie coffee shops use this, a roof that appears to be two-thirds of an inverted obtuse triangle. So sorry to go a little math on y'all. An example is the Johnny's Coffee Shop on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles.
That's a very cool looking building.
Yeah. Another feature of, or another characteristic, I guess I should say, is the starbursts.
Yay, I love starbursts.
Yeah. And I know we don't mean the candy.
No. No, that's like one of my favorite little symbols from mid-century design.
Oh, really? Well, it comes from Googie Architecture. It's an ornament that's common with Googie. It shows its connection to the space age while being whimsical. So if you can't picture it, you can picture if you can picture the Las Vegas sign. It's like a little star at the top. That's what we mean by the starbursts. They have no actual function apart from being ornamental.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Boomerangs everywhere. The kind of angled roofs kind of connect with this. Along with the space age, a lot of the atomic sciences also are kind of being a thing during the 1950s. So they make a show in this style as well. Cantilevered roof lines, again, because we're meant to be extra and larger than life with Googie Architecture, the roofs are meant to feel weightless, often extend well beyond the building. And of course, neon lighting, right? Bright, colorful neon signs. I guess this kind of goes back to the whole reason why Googie started, because we're trying to get the attention of the drivers on the road. And how did you do that? Well, over the top, large signs, bright neon colors, so that as you're driving, you're like, oh, I need to go there because my eye's going
there. What kind of transitions into our connection to today's segment is a lot of the neon signs in Las Vegas. When they took them down or changed them, they actually kept them in a museum. Have you ever been? It's on my list.
No, but that's kind of cool.
There's a neon graveyard museum in Las Vegas, and you can go during the day or at night, and it's an outdoor, basically just rows and rows of retired Las Vegas neon signs. What? And so you can go see them during the day, and if you go at night, they light them all up, and you're just like basically walking through all these rows of these huge neon signs. I really, really want to go.
Ooh, road trip.
But because
I don't think the Sunset Limited takes us to Las Vegas, so I think it goes to LA. That's the train that comes out of here, by the way.
Right. Cool. Yeah, I've been meaning to go back to Vegas, like at the top of the show. I haven't been since I was a kid, so there's more stuff I could do now. Still probably not gambling. So the bringing up the fact that there are some retired neon signs kind of brings us to the end of this architecture style. So Googie Architecture began to see its decline after the Apollo 11 moon landing.
It was, by the way, sorry to interrupt, but we made an episode on the Apollo program. So check out episodes 26 and 27, which we will put in the show notes. Sorry to interrupt again.
No, good plug. So as the popularity behind the space program disappeared and environmentalists started movements against nuclear power, Googie began to fall out of style. And then as the 70s rolled around, buildings, especially commercial buildings, were meant to blend in with the environment and not call out attention for themselves. The characteristics of Googie architecture were the opposite of what people in the 70s wanted, so Googie disappeared.
Yep. So even though it went away, some fans fought to keep it, as it represented the early days of car culture. So we have groups like the Los Angeles Conservancy Modern Committee, which was formed in 1984 in response to the demolition of some Googie coffee shops and drive-ins in Westwood. And they fought for getting historical or landmark designations for existing Googie buildings. They also saved places such as Norm's Restaurants, Johnny's Coffee Shop, which we talked about it before, and the oldest McDonald's in Downey, California, which we'll talk about later on.
That's nice.
Yeah. The influence of Googie, though, extends a little bit past the road. So it did start with flashy and exaggerated design, right? Meant to catch the eye of the traveler. So it made a really good transition into Las Vegas Strip, kind of like Jackie mentioned, with many neon and lights to catch the eye of people, bringing them into the hotels and the casinos. The design also influenced TV, such as the Jetsons, and the background style of series and movies such as Cartoon Network's cartoons from the 1990s, if you remember those.
I do.
Yeah, so like Dexter's Lab, Johnny Bravo, later on Futurama, and even The Incredibles. The background style of those cartoons is very Googie.
It sure is. And Disneyland, too. The original Disneyland Tomorrowland was very Googie inspired, or the original incarnation from 1955 to 1966. Tomorrowland was generally open space and represented the future and what they pictured the future looking like when it got to 1986. And there are many futuristic designs used on the rides.
Yep. Anyway, so here's some examples of Googie architecture. Be on the lookout, and hopefully we can put some of these up on Instagram. But the Space Needle in Seattle, which, side note, I was there last summer, so I got some pictures of it.
Yay, perfect.
Yeah. This was the center point of the World Expo 1962, which honestly should be its own episode. Maybe
It's such an intimidating, all of the World Fair, World Expo things. It's just like, we'll be on rabbit holes for days researching those episodes.
That is true. But the U.S. wanted to make a connection with the space age and provide hope during the Cold War era by creating a permanent landmark for the expo, similar to how Paris created the Eiffel Tower. So the Space Needle brings in all the characteristics of Googie, such as space age network and big pylons holding it up. The fabulous Las Vegas sign in Las Vegas, Nevada, which we talked a little bit about earlier. So this was designed in 1959 by Betty Willis. It's a 25-foot tall classic design of like these two poles with the sign being a little bit offset. The sign is a diamond and it's double backed. So on one side it says "Welcome to fabulous Las Vegas," and on the opposite side it says "Drive carefully, come back soon."
Aw.
Yeah. Some of the Googie characteristics here is this larger than life look. It's not symmetrical. And again, it's got a little starburst on top, which I had never noticed before. We also have a Mexican restaurant here in town, which is called Gringos, and their sign is the Las Vegas sign.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. The oldest McDonald's, right? So this is in Downey, California, and it's really the third McDonald's ever built. It's just that it's the oldest remaining. And it opened in 1953, in August 1953. And some of the characteristics of Googie architecture here are these sloping roofs with large overhangs, larger than life use of neon, especially also the large golden arches. So McDonald's, if you think of McDonald's, the M, they call them the golden arches, right? So in this building, there's one arch on either side of the building, and it looks like it's holding up the roof. And the sign outside is also very Googie, and it's similar to the Las Vegas sign. I didn't talk about it too much because I just talked about Vegas. And the last one I wanted to talk about is the theme building at LAX, which is the Los Angeles International Airport. And this building is meant to be a symbol of the original airport design, which had all the terminals connected by a large glass dome. So in the place of the dome today is the theme building, which if you can picture LAX, it's that like weird spider looking thing in the center. That's the theme building. So originally it was meant to provide panoramic views of air traffic at the airport for guests and included a restaurant. Though currently it sits somewhat abandoned, but it's still a very recognizable landmark. I couldn't find anything on it. I know it's been going through some renovations, but I could not find anything about what's going on inside. So I'm pretty sure currently it's just not being used.
Interesting.
Yeah. But some of the Googie characteristics, so it is, again, larger than life. It's 135-foot parabolic arches that are holding up this giant space-age design UFO-looking thing at the very top. And while not a characteristic of Googie specifically, the exterior lights were designed by the Walt Disney Imagineers.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So if you guys ever get to travel and you get to LAX, look up and maybe poke around, see if you can get yourselves into this place. But now that we've cut up to the present, it's time for our etiquette segment. So Jackie, what do we have today?
So to mix things up a bit, I got this week's etiquette lesson from a different etiquette expert's book. So this is from Emily Post's Blue Book of Etiquette from 1950, which is super famous actually. It just says etiquette and the book happens to be blue, but that's what people call it when they're trying to reference back to it. So this is totally not related to the topic of the show, but sometimes they aren't. It's just the first one that sounded interesting while I was flipping through the book today.
Okay.
So this is a section on attending the theater. So everything in this section is actually geared toward groups of 4 or 6 going to the theater. But there's a few bits in here about just like if it's just 2 people as well. So if you are hosting a group to go to the theater, you have to buy all the tickets in advance. And not only must a host get seats in advance, but he must get good ones.
Oh.
Actual quote. Apparently, it is bad etiquette to ask people to go to a performance and then stand in line to get seats at the time of the performance. So you should have taken care of that before the day. It is also practical as well as polite to ask, how near do you like to sit, and then get seats accordingly when you invite your friends. So this applies to concerts and lectures as well.
It's like a little bit background, because like usually you're like, oh, I've got this extra ticket, do you want to go?
Yeah.
But this is like
saying, so in that case, you'd have it already. But if you wanted to like call your friends and be like, hey, do you want to go see Guys and Dolls on Friday? Then you could, how close do you want to sit? And then you go buy the tickets, I guess, once they agree to go. So going down the aisle of a theater has etiquette.
Interesting.
So the host, or whichever gentleman is holding the tickets, goes down the aisle first and gives the tickets to the usher, and then the others follow in the order in which they are to sit, which the hostess must direct. So the one who is to sit 6th from the aisle, if it's a group of 6, whether a lady or a gentleman, goes first. Then the 5th person, and then if like the gentleman, for example, with the tickets is 4th, he just goes in 4th, even though he like doesn't have the tickets anymore, blah, blah, blah. Apparently it's very important that you just always walk in the order that you're going to sit, just so you're not blocking anyone's view any longer than possible. And this is particularly important if the party arrives after the curtain has gone up. And I guess the idea is so that you file into the row without shuffling once you get down to the seats.
I just have this like picture in my brain of like in the lobby before like you open the doors, like, okay, everybody stand in single file line. Johnny, you are 3rd, you're not 4th, move over one.
Yep. That is implied heavily in this little section, that the hostess is directing what order everyone walks in. And the guy with the tickets goes first, gives the tickets to the usher, and then everyone stands in their single file line that they discussed in the lobby. Anyway, if a gentleman and lady go to the theater alone, the question as to who goes down the aisle first depends on where the usher is. So if the usher takes the tickets at the head of the aisle, the lady follows the usher down to the seats. And if the usher is not at the head of the aisle, the gentleman with the tickets goes first. And then once he gives the tickets to the usher, then they trade places and the lady goes first the rest of the way down.
Interesting. Glad
they wrote this down, because I guess everyone's supposed to have this little dance memorized when they go to the theater. So for passing strangers to sit, in passing strangers to get to your seats, always face the stage and get as close to the backs of the seats as possible, being careful not to drag anything over the heads of those sitting in either row. If someone is obliged to get up to let you pass, say thank you or I'm sorry. If you're seated and others pass you, you must give them enough room to pass. If you can do this by just turning your knees sideways, that's better. Especially if the play or the movie has started. But if there's little space and they would have to step over your knees, you must, of course, stand, but then sit down again quickly. Okay. Exclamation point. She put an actual exclamation point in the book.
Okay, so be fast, be speedy, be hasty.
So remember that during every second you stand, you are cutting off the view of all those who are seated behind you.
Okay.
And so when you're sitting, hats off, even for women, which goes against our previous hat etiquette where women did not have to remove their hats indoors. Apparently in a theater, you do.
Interesting. Even if you wonder if that's a change from the 1950 to 1957. Because the last tip came from 1957 and this one comes from 1950.
I'm not sure. But I think it's really just all about making sure people behind you can see and being as courteous as possible. Because she also says that if a woman thinks her hat is small enough not to disturb anyone's view, she must still remove it if asked to do so.
Okay.
So there was a part in here I cut out about, and I don't know why I cut it out, except for I was thinking the etiquette segment was running too long, but there was a fun, sassy comment about how you can tell a rude person from across the theater if you see a hat with a brim seated some way away, like something sassy like that, where it's like, oh, that woman is just confused because she's like sitting there with her hat on. How rude. So that brings us a little to proper dress at the theater, which I thought was really interesting because she said even here in 1950 that the present trend of fashion is toward ordinary day clothes for both men and women. So even then people were going to the theater in their day clothes. But she does say that when sitting down front in the best seats, especially during the opening week, ladies sometimes wear semi-evening dresses and gentlemen tuxedos.
Okay.
But then she also says that their plans for after the theater naturally affect their choice of dress no matter where they are sitting. So I guess the theater isn't what you get fancy for. It's if you have a fancy dinner afterwards, then you will dress fancier. But if you're just going home afterwards, maybe you won't. I'm not really sure what that means.
I mean, wait, you don't sit at home after 6:30 p.m. wearing your tuxedo and or your evening dress?
I guess not.
I mean, it's after 6:30. What else are you gonna wear?
That's so funny. I didn't realize, but back then day clothes were a little bit nicer than day clothes now, but
That's true.
I guess that means I don't need to be quite as offended when I see people at the theater in jeans. Anyway. Talking at the theater. If those behind you insist on talking, it is never good policy to turn around and glare. If you are young, they pay no attention, and if you are older, most young people think an angry older person is the funniest sight on earth.
I am a glarer.
Basically, even back then, no one would take you seriously if you tried that, though. The only thing you can do, she says, is to say amiably, "I'm sorry, but I can't hear anything while you talk," and if they still persist, you get the usher to call the manager.
Oh, I would glare and then be like, manager.
Mm-hmm. Leaving the theater. So there's another dance you have to dance on your way back up the aisle. So the gentleman on the aisle, or nearest to the aisle, stands in the aisle a moment so that the lady who follows him can walk with, or if the aisle is too crowded, precede him. Under nearly all circumstances, a lady goes first. An exception to this is where the crowd is really dense. In this case, the man can go first to make a wedge for her, and she follows closely behind him to take advantage of the space he's making. In a theater party of 6, the first gentleman should let the lady who sat next to him go ahead of him, but he doesn't have to wait for the rest of the ladies. It's just the one who was sitting immediately next to him. And that is seeing going to the theater in a group. What do you think?
I like it, especially the little dance at the very beginning, because
where everyone gets in their rows.
Yes, because in my mind it's like elementary kids lighting up in the hallway with like their the finger on their mouth and like their hand up in the air. That's what I picture, and I hope that's what she meant.
I hope that is, if I ever go to a theater in a group, I'm 1000% like gonna be really tacky about that in the hallway. I don't know. Or maybe you're supposed to figure that out in the car on your way to the theater.
Nonsense. You do this in the lobby in front of everyone. Because everybody should be doing the same thing.
Well, I guess they all have tickets with assigned seats on, so I guess everyone has their ticket, and then you just get in line in the order of your ticket.
Yeah, but no, because it said that the gentleman at the front has the tickets and gives them to the usher. So what do?
Oh, yeah,
you
you're right.
Give out the tickets and then no, I need them back.
Now I need them back. Yeah, you're right. Oh, man. Well,
no, I think the guy at the very front needs to be like, okay, Johnny, you're next, and Samantha, you're behind Johnny, and Clarice, you're behind Samantha, and then Thomas, you're behind them, okay? And then we'll all walk together. Ready, and go.
So I'm kind of getting the vibe that you like these etiquette tips ironically, not actually.
I like them. I think we should still give them the stamp of approval.
Okay. I agree then. I'm fine with it too. I think most of it, other than, the little seating chart dance, I think most of them are really just normal advice. So, yeah, yes. I say we can approve it.
Awesome. Well, then it looks like we've landed the plane. So thank you guys for listening today. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show and tell a friend.
You can also follow us on Instagram at MCL Podcast. This is the best place to send us feedback and episode suggestions, so send us a DM anytime. And you can also find us on YouTube at MCL Podcast.
Woo! I'm going to be wooing every time. So thanks guys for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Bye!
Thank you for listening to Mid-Century Living. Please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave a review. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at MCL Podcast. See you next Friday.